House to Home, presented by Remax Diamond Realty.
Okay, we are traveling the world. At least one of us is. Of course, I'm Jason Salas here in Harmon, as I always am. This is my home. Gina Campos is down at her home away from home in Agana. And Liz is in the Great Frontier, the 50th, no, the 49th state. Wait, 49th or 50th? No, 49th, Alaska.
Yeah, Alaska.
Geography is obviously not my best subject and everything, but it looks beautiful where you're at, Liz.
Yep, check it out. Beautiful country.
Oh,
And great
wow.
for salmon fishing for sure.
Well, you know, that absolutely conforms to everything I know about beauty, about having picturesque backdrops, and conformity is kind of the topic that we were talking about today. Because Gina, as I understand it, there is public policy on the books that actually dictates exactly what is non-conforming use of land and conformity. See what I did there? So, how exactly are we taking a look at this?
Well, we've gotten a lot of inquiries whether someone is purchasing property or they're selling property, and we find out during the course of the sale or the purchase that the property doesn't meet setback. Now, let me explain what setback is. If you go to the zoning law of Guam, it actually dictates. Yeah. So this is a provision that tells you when you were allowed to not meet setbacks. So if you scroll down to the bottom, I highlighted this section here, section 1526, is a provision in the law that tells you during a period in time. So if you look, it says the property owner authorized representative shall bear the burden of proof that the building or structure was constructed sometimes during the period of November 91 through June 97. So during that period of time, so if you're adding on to your home now, it's not going to be legal, because the Guam laws require that when you have a home, you have to be 15 feet away from your front boundary, 8 feet away from your side, and 10 feet away from the back. So that's the wall of the house to the boundary line. And so when we're doing our business, we find that we come across homes that don't meet these setback regulations. And that's the first thing we ask them is, this is the law, and that's the document you just shared. Did you make your improvements during that period? Because if you did, and it says that the owner bears the burden of proof, and you can prove it to the government that it was built during that time, then you're legal, but you're non-conforming.
Okay, now Liz, what is the penalty, if any, about properties that do not conform?
Well, the problem with that is if you're selling a home and it doesn't meet any of those setbacks, it is a problem. Instead of penalty, I would say you cannot sell your home. You don't have the ability to sell it unless you correct the deficiency. And the deficiency may mean knocking off 4 feet of your back wall or 2 feet of your side wall. And if your intent is to sell, it becomes a problem, because then you can't sell it. So just recently, I'm selling a home in Agate, and it does not meet the setback requirements. So I went back and I asked the owner, when was the home built? And I usually try to do this with my sellers. Gina and I try to identify to make sure there are any issues on the front side so we can work on correcting it. And in this particular case, they did not meet the setback requirements. So what I did was I asked, when did you build the home? And fortunately, it was built between that window of time. So then I asked her, give me documentation that show me proof. So she showed me the building permit and other documentation that proved that it was built during that window of time, where they were able to go ahead and sell, because it's referred to as legal non-conforming, because the setback requirements were not within that window of time. Therefore, we refer to it as legal non-conforming. So we're in the process of selling the home, so there's no problem, no issues with it as a result.
Okay, now even though it passes the legal test, obviously, because it's legal non-conforming, does it pass the eyeball test? And somebody taking a look at it may say, okay, I realize that, you know, there's nothing against the law for this, but Gina, how does this affect its market value?
Well, if it's legal and the buyer is willing to continue with the purchase, then a lot of times we find it, you know, as long as you document that it's legal, and documentation, you know what Liz is talking about, she's got proof that it was built in that timeline. And I would take that a step further and say, when you sell the property this time, find a way to record those documents so that if it gets lost, at least it's always recorded. And when you pull up the title report, it'll always show that this property may not be conforming, but it's legal. But yes, Jace, it does affect value. And you mentioned something, you know, the eye test. You said the eye test. Well, here's the deal. I can go, I mean, you're the owner, but you cannot with your eye measure or show me exactly where your marker is if the marker is not present. And we do this all the time. We go look at a piece of property, and if there's not a fence there to show me where the boundary is, I can't really take a measuring tape and measure out 8 feet away from your house and say, okay, well, this is where your house, the boundary should be, because sometimes it's not 8 feet, sometimes it's 10 or 12.
And these are measurements, so they're very, very specific and very, very precise. I mean, if you're off by like what, 1/3 of an inch, you're in violation, right?
It has to be precise. Like you could be like with the surveyors, I've had surveyors look at it and say, well, Gina, it's only a foot off, and we are allowed to be about a foot off. But how, I mean, how about if it's only 2 feet off? How can I measure with my eye when you don't, or even with a tape, when I don't know where your markers are?
Right.
And you know, we do encourage sellers, mark off your boundary line. Why? Because these are the things that I should be checking for, but I cannot do it if those markers aren't there. It's impossible.
Okay, so Liz, to wrap up, because this is a fascinating topic. In theory, this is very, very interesting, and obviously something that as a property owner, I may want to at least, you know, take a look at my property, maybe have a look at my documentation, like you and Gino always say. But in practice, how often does this come up as a discrepancy or something that needs to be, you know, highly considered?
It comes up quite a bit, especially when Gina and I are looking at selling or someone is purchasing property. It's a frequent, because the old days, they would say, well, your boundary points are marked by the coconut trees. And they'll say, hey, you see those coconut trees? Those are the boundary points. But that doesn't cut it. You have to see a marker, and the marker has to have a cap that shows the surveyor, and it shows their number. Their registered number as a licensed surveyor. So you can't just go and look at what do you call those rebars, for example, because anyone can stick a rebar in the ground. So it is important that you have your points marked, especially if you're looking at selling it in the future. Sometimes what we do is we get a concrete pole just as a flag to show, okay, it's here, because at any time a bulldozer or the neighbor could be cleaning the yard, and either they cover it up or it gets pulled out, and without your knowledge. So if you have something to market and protect it, that is the critical thing. Protect your boundary points, because you need it in the future.
Protect your property, protect your doggone, and that's the way we want to teach you how to be. All right, ladies, thank you so much. And on that note,
Okay.
All right, well, Liz, enjoy the whale watching, I would assume, and some really good food up there, and
Salmon catching.
Catching
salmon
fish.
catching.
That's what we've been doing. Salmon catching.
Okay, avoid the
Yes.
bears.
For sure.
Okay, and have a safe trip home.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
House to Home, presented by RE/MAX Diamond Realty.